Okay, everyone, we're going to start talk. We have a visitor today. This is normally my network AI class, and so students will look at your projects after she's done, and often walk Jackie over to her next visit. She is a lecturer candidate for here at USC. But I've known Jackie, I think, probably since about 1989. A long time about that. Probably one of the first simulation, the first GIS workshops or whatever that started.
Probably at an ITSEC somewhere.
Yeah, maybe at an ITSEC. But it's been a long time. So we also have. She's going to give a great talk about some of the work you did at ICT, or what you've done since you left ICT, or what you're thinking about now.
All of the above.
Okay. She had how many years at ICT?
13 and a half.
13 and a half years ago. Probably not too many of you know, in the start of 1999, I was asked by the chief scientist of the U.S. Army to draft an operating plan and a research agenda to found ICT. And I did that as a special project, and Jackie was my helper. She's basically like, I wrote stuff down and she came back and fixed it. Made it better. So she's like a longtime friend for a long, long time. And she is we're looking at standing up a virtual reality class, since VR is hot again, so we're trying to do that. And we're trying to figure out other classes for her to be in the CS Games program. So Jackie, start.
Thanks, Mike. So today I'm not going to talk about virtual reality. I'm going to do that in tomorrow's class. But today, this is a little AI-ish, so I thought this would be a good topic for here. And this is an idea that I've been playing with for a couple of years now. So what is the ultimate selfie? Well, it's a concept for something that can live on after us. And I'm going to go through a number of concepts today. It's going to be somewhat of a wild ride. And to set the stage for it, I'm going to show, and I think it looks pretty intense, but the idea of the singularity is something that is becoming more understood in the general public. So by the time this concept hits movie theaters like this, it's because this zeitgeist has formed where people understand what it's all about. And there are a lot of issues, of course. And this idea of transcendence or singularity is certainly not anything new. We can go all the way back to really old science fiction, probably back before that. But the examples I'm going to show of Olaf Stapleton's Star Maker is from the 1930s. And this was a book that is considered by many sci-fi writers to be one of the essential sci-fi books that influenced a whole generation of writers. In the book Star Maker, Olaf Stapleton has his hero become able to unfetter their brain from their body so that they are not inhibited by the biological body, and can go and explore all the corners of the universe. So that dream of unfettered consciousness is something that has been explored by a lot of writers. In the 1950s, C.S. Lewis, who's better known for his Narnia stories, had a sci-fi trilogy, and in the final book of that, called That Hideous Strength, there was a decapitated head of a scientist that was kept alive to be a vehicle for uploading someone else's consciousness into that head, so that they could use that head to communicate. And it was actually evil overlords who were trying to rule Earth that used this crazy head thing as an uploaded consciousness vehicle. And then more recently, Greg Egan has used a number of constructs of uploading your brain into different things like machines or avatars. So it's certainly not a new concept. Even Hans Moravec back in the 80s proposed uploading your brain to a robot. Ray Kurzweil has done a lot of work in this in the last few years. And eventually, this idea of the singularity, which is kind of where we become one with our machines. Our machines become so much more powerful and smarter than us that humankind is forced to evolve. And one of the ways that this can happen is by uploading your brain or your consciousness into a computer or into some kind of technological container. Now, there's one issue with this. The tricky part of the singularity is consciousness. We don't know what consciousness is, we don't know where it comes from, we don't know where it resides, we don't know how we can transfer it intact to some kind of different form. So I went through all that just to say that what I'm talking about today is not the singularity. it's not about uploading your consciousness into a computer, because I'm not even sure that's a good idea. I'm not sure that if you have a consciousness in a computer and you can live forever, you know, what does that do to your humanity? You would be something fundamentally different. We don't know what that is. It could be good, it could be bad, like in that movie. But it would be kind of odd, I think, to have the world ruled by people who had lived for hundreds and hundreds of years, you know, without a body. What would that mean for how they would make decisions about the rest of us? Because I can't imagine we're all going to upload our consciousness. So I'm not going to get into this because I think consciousness is very tricky. So it's not about uploading our brains to a computer. So we don't have to solve that problem of consciousness. Now I want to go through some trends that really inform my thinking on this ultimate selfie. And I'm going to go over each of these in a little more detail. But you can see there's a number of things that we're experiencing today that have helped me come to this conclusion that we can make this ultimate selfie. The first one is the increasingly quantified self. So today, with things like the quantified self movement, you can put sensors on that measure your body's physiology. You can see exactly what your skin conductance is, your heart rate. You can even do things like monitor your internal biome. You can swallow pills that will actually monitor things inside for you. So these are typically small. They're wristwatches, they're Fitbits, they're things like that. They don't look like this cartoon. But they're getting smaller and smaller, and they actually can be woven into our clothes very soon, and they might even be implanted in our bodies. So we can capture our body's physiology pretty well. We have made great strides capturing our outward appearance. So this is Paul DeBevic's light stage work over at the ICT. And this is used quite a bit now for capturing actors for films so that the body doubles can be used after the film is finished shooting for post-production. So they scan these actors, and then that data is actually available so that the actors don't have to be there for dangerous things or things that are thought of after the primary shooting is done. So this leads me to think, well, why can't we do this for everybody? And is this going to be your baby's first picture? And then how often are we going to do that? How often are they going to get photographed like this as they grow? I think this is not far off, though. Now, the next trend is capturing the behaviors of our body. So with motion capture technology, putting sensors over one's body, you can pretty much get a good representation of the motion that a person has. It's not perfect yet, but it's getting better. It's kind of limited by the number of sensor points you can put on a body. Often the motion capture that's gotten this way has to be cleaned up by animators. And there are some parts of our body that are so expressive and convey so much of our humanness that they need even more sensors to be able to actually get that motion correct, or we fall into that uncanny valley. So more on the face here than on the whole body for some of the other things. So this leads me to our teleconferencing persona. So this is a way of taking your persona in some form and being able to use it in a distant place. So unlike video conferencing where you're just sitting there in front of a camera talking to other people sitting in front of a camera, some of these technologies allow you to actually get out and move around. So in the upper left we have the beam system where you're sitting in front of a camera, but you've got game controllers and you can move that thing all over. So you could visit all parts of a conference or go to somebody's desk, and some of you may have seen this in The Big Bang Theory where Sheldon Cooper didn't want to go to the office, so he actually went in one of these. On the right is a system called the Sociobot, and that's another robotic type of thing that can be moved. The face is formed into the shape of a human face, and they can project either a video image or a graphic image on that so that it has sort of a face that moves. And then at the bottom is another project from ICT, which is a 3D video conferencing system. So one person sits in front of a camera and a projector that's putting structured light on their face, so that gives them the 3D geometry. and the video texture from that face, and those are projected onto a spinning mirror that's going so fast you don't see it. It just looks like you're talking to a hologram, although I always think of that disembodied head and that biggest strength when I see this stuff. I don't trust it. So that leads me to next-gen dimensional displays, and there are a lot of these coming out now. Up in the upper left is the anisotropic spinning mirror that we saw in the video conferencing thing, and this was early on when it was just doing 3D geometry. And there are a number of these that are out there, so more than I could possibly go into. In the lower right is an MIT design based on anisotropic leaky mode couplers, and they act as waveguides for light. And so placing a number of them very close together, what you do is actually get interference patterns with the light, which is what produces a hologram. So what the viewer sees is actually a synthetic hologram that's being produced by these leaky mode couplers. And then on the lower left is a big array of tiny pico projectors, also part of Paul Debevic's work, where every angle you could possibly view a person's face from is being projected, and then they'll put a blurring thing in front, and you're only going to see the views, much like a lenticular screen, that are right for your position. Okay, the next trend is the printed self. So this is Joey. Joey showed up at SIGGRAPH last year, and he's 16. He actually had to have a parent with him to get on the floor. But he was in the emerging tech part of SIGGRAPH. And Joey had built himself a 3D full-body scanner. And he printed it with the little homemade MakerBot kind of printer. You stand on that one circle there, and the gears move it around and keep it in sync with the prime sense camera that's going up and down that pole, and in about 2 minutes you have a full 3D, full color set of data for you. And he gives it to you on a flash drive, or he'll print it out for you. So this is kind of interesting. All of this data is coming down to a place where it is widely available. A 16-year-old can build his own, and his was actually a higher resolution than the Arizona professor's that was right next door. So this is becoming widely available, but it makes me ask the question, what happens to that digital data? Who owns that digital data? You know, actors may own their data, or the studios may own it. You may own your data, but some of the scanning companies may own it too. So this problem is starting to be addressed by the likes of companies that are actually agents for your digital double. So there's some of these that have started, like a CAA for your digital double. But as far back as 2000, Kevin Bacon was the first actor to claim rights on his digital double, and it was for a movie called Hollow Man. So they did very high-res scans of him at Digital Domain. They had bone, they had skin, they had even some blood vessels, and he said he owned that data, and he's since given it off to medical science for them to use. But it's a good question. And then we have personalized everything. So this is the last trend in this kind of what we can capture from our body. So we can capture these things for customized clothes. We can make our own customized, well, we can't, but we can be scanned so the prosthetics, if we need a hip replacement or whatever, actually matches with our body data. You can get your shoes actually made from your own foot data, and they'll make what they call fast and then be able to put the leather around that so it fits you perfectly. So this is the age we live in, the age you guys are all going to have for the next several decades. The last trend I want to talk about is avatars, though. So avatars are the kind of 3D persona that you inhabit when you are in a game or a virtual world. And some of us are using these quite a bit these days. So you also have a sort of avatar like on your Facebook profile page or in other social media that you use. But I'm going to be talking about avatars as these 3D representations that you inhabit in a virtual world or a game. So they can be based on your actual appearance, Like eventually you can step into one of those scanning devices and then have your avatar look exactly like you. Or you can do an ideal self, so they can be taller or thinner or have red hair, whatever. Or they can actually be a fantasy self, so you could have something that's totally not human. And that kind of goes back to Jaron Lanier back in the early days of VR, trying to be a lobster in virtual reality. So the use of avatars is growing faster than you might think, especially if you haven't been in a virtual world lately. How many of you guys are in virtual worlds or multiplayer or online role-playing games? Wow, it's not even half, guys. They're keeping you too busy in this program, I think. But I'm going to show you some facts and figures about avatar use. So the British research firm K0 puts out a quarterly universe chart, which charts the growth and demise, if there is some, of virtual worlds that are out there. And their virtual worlds span a range of different kinds of things, from learning games to purely social ones. Now, the concentric rings are years, so in the middle is around 2004, they don't go back forever. And then the outer ring is 2000, on this chart, 2013, third quarter. The size of the dots is the comparable size of the worlds. The orange dot is when they were launched. And there is no virtual world on this chart less than 1 million registered users. So we're going to look at each quadrant a little bit better. The quadrants are actually age levels, and they're not uniform. So the first quadrant is ages 5 to 10. Okay, so ages 5 to 10. You wouldn't think there'd be a lot of kids that old in virtual worlds, but there definitely are. So there's one called Jumpstart that's for really young kids. Webkins is a social virtual world where you actually buy a stuffed animal that is also your avatar in the virtual world. And Disney's Club Penguin, which is the great big dot down there at the age 10. So lots of kids are in this. And we'll talk about the full numbers in a minute. But the next quadrant is only another 5-year period, ages 10 to 15. So this has things like Disney's Infinity, Pop Tropica. The great big dot down at the bottom is Stardolls. Now Stardolls has 239 million registered users, and it is basically an online paper doll fashion world. You can be social, you can meet with your friends in there. It actually has some redeeming value because you can actually become historical characters. You can go buy Ada Lovelace costumes or other historical figures, Amelia Earhart. And there are some guys in there, so, and then you take photo albums of yourself and you share them with other people. So 239 million. Now, for comparison, Minecraft is 2 or 3 dots down from the age 13 bar, and it's only got about 40 million registered users, and probably everybody's heard of Minecraft. Now, in the next quadrant, we're doing a 10-year span, ages 15 to 25, so you see not as many worlds, but some of them are much bigger, and they span kind of a broader range. IMVU is in there. And then for the old folks, there are very few virtual worlds, but there are some, and you can even see Second Life, which people think has gone away. It has grown every year since its launch. So, yep, it's not gone away at all. In fact, there's a new CEO, and he may really take it someplace. We will see. Okay, so I took the Q14, the first quarter 2014 numbers. The company would only let me show Q3 2013 slides, but I added up the new ones. And from ages 5 to 15, which is only 10 years, there are 1.5 billion user accounts. Now, that doesn't mean 1.5 billion kids, because lots of them have more than one account. They're in Minecraft, they're in Pop Tropica, they're in IMVU, they're in a number of things. But that's still a lot, and it's more than Facebook. So 1.5 billion users. That's pretty amazing. So in summary, I just want to say about avatars, they're growing, whether we know it or not, and young kids are using these worlds to learn a lot of different things, to entertain themselves, to be social with their friends, and they present themselves with an avatar. They're very used to presenting themselves with an avatar, and a different avatar for different games and different purposes. They're not on Facebook, they're not on these other social networks, they're definitely in these virtual worlds. And there's a number of reasons why that might be, and one is that the roaming radius we give young kids today has shrunk to almost nothing. So when I was a kid, I could ride my bike 10 miles and nobody cared, be home for dinner. No kid on my block is allowed out in the front yard. They don't ride their bike. If they ride their bike, it's helmets, it's take the bikes to a bike path and ride the bike. So everything they do is monitored. There are play dates. Everything they do, except this time alone on these virtual worlds, is monitored by their parents or an adult. So where do they learn things on their own? I maintain it's in these virtual worlds, and that's part of what makes them popular. But the question is, what does it mean to always be inhabiting an avatar? What do avatars do for these kids? What do they do for us? I'm going to show you a little video that was done by a student of mine in a class I taught at a nearby university on narratives in the metaverse. And for this class, they were allowed to take any game, any social world, and make some kind of narrative. So they could make a film, they could illustrate a poem, they could make a full game that had a narrative content. This one student was really intrigued with the idea of being an avatar, so she made this film. I think it's playing. No. Oh. I can't find the little. I know, but it keeps popping up this other thing. There. Okay.
When I look in the mirror, I don't see anyone looking back. Mirrors are legends to me, an idea. I know they're supposed to reflect the self, but we don't have that here. People spend their entire lives trying to find out who they are. We dream. We create. We construct meaning out of nothingness. We hope we are part of something bigger. I already know that I'm part of something bigger. I can't exist on my own. I'm an extension of someone else. When she decides to quit, I'm not there anymore. When I look in the mirror, I'm not really looking. I'm waiting to learn how to look. Inside.
So I thought this was a really poignant approach to thinking about avatars. It was done 7 years ago at this point. I don't think we've come too much closer to understanding what avatars are or what they do for us, but there's some clues coming out that I'll go over. And there are some things they might be good for. So the U.S. Army came up with a prototype project called the Human Dimension Modeling and Simulation Effort, which was called the Avatar Project. So it's really hard to find if you search for it because Avatar, the movie, came out a little bit before that. But the idea was they put soldiers in these multiplayer training scenarios. And typically they get an avatar that all the avatars have the same capabilities. And often they can run forever, they're expert marks people, just like you would have perhaps in a multiplayer game. You can do things that you couldn't do in real life. So the idea was to make training more realistic by matching the capabilities of the avatar to the actual measurements that the soldiers get and that are recorded in their DTMS, their training management system, data for training management system. And there, when they would run these multiplayer training scenarios, if you were out of shape, you couldn't run as far, and you would have to take a knee. Or you might be fatigued from running, and your marksmanship would be less than it would be if you were not fatigued. And the marksmanship was another metric that was mapped onto these avatars. And what happened was the commanders found when they had a room full of people, it would be just like this, the soldiers all sitting at the computers, that when they would give commands, they might not match their objectives because their team was actually displaying their actual physical characteristics. So that changes the way you would think about training and the way you think about commanding a team in the military. So in addition to having the kind of the real world capabilities reflected in your avatar, at ICT they were looking at, well, what could we do to make it maybe motivational? So what they did was scan this general who came to visit, and then I think they exaggerated his form a little bit because I don't really remember him being that heavy. But the idea was that if you were using an avatar and it looked like that, you might be motivated to do some exercise to get your avatar down to a more ideal state. So looking at them for motivation is one possibility. Now, the Army didn't buy this at all, so it never went anywhere. Now, there are some stories, hopefully this thing will come up, yep, about avatars having a very positive effect on people. There's research coming out of Jeremy Balanson's lab up at Stanford that shows what you watch your avatar do actually changes your behavior in the physical world afterwards. Now, we don't know if that is sticky enough to last very long, or if it's it definitely lasts for a couple of days after watching your avatar. So if you have a taller avatar, you come out of the virtual environment, you're going to be able to actually negotiate better because taller avatars feel more confident. It's a very interesting thing. But this woman named Fran had Parkinson's, and her daughter put her into the virtual world Second Life and said, you know, maybe this is something you can do while you're not as mobile as you used to be. And one of the things Fran did was have her avatar join Tai Chi classes. So her avatar would do the Tai Chi movements, I don't know how to do them, but with a bunch of other avatars. And it turned out that in the physical world, she would say, you know, my avatar can do that. I can do that. And she was able to maintain a better equilibrium and do more things in the physical world after she had been in the virtual one for a while. So that's avatars that you inhabit, which is my definition of avatars. Now I want to talk about some of the other type of characters that you will see in a game or a virtual world. So you actually have the avatars that I've been talking about, and then there are background characters. You don't have much interaction with them. They might have a little AI. Maybe you can kill them. Maybe they run. Maybe they attack. You even find these in some of the role-playing things in Second Life. And then there are intelligent characters that can interact with you, sense you, maybe react. And these I'm calling virtual humans, or agent avatars. Call them a couple of things. So while I was at ICT, we did make a number of these kinds of intelligent avatars, these agent avatars, and one of them was very simple. It was a guide avatar. So if you built a space and you wanted people to be oriented to that space, considering these worlds are open 24/7, somebody might be there or might not be there when you jump into them, having an intelligent agent there all the time to get people oriented is a good deal, because then they're never like, what is this place? It's boring. So for this particular one, which was a virtual version of the National Intrepid Center of Excellence, it's a place where military people with PTSD and traumatic brain injury go in DC for treatment. We built a whole virtual version of it so that they could continue to meet with their caregivers or take classes after they had done their time at the actual facility. So this was a guide bot that could tell you what classes were going on, it could answer questions, and this one we see it's typing, but we actually did get it working with sound. We did some that were much more complicated, and we did them in several virtual worlds like Active Worlds and some other ones. This one was in Second Life again, and it was a checkpoint exercise. all of the villagers here are agents, and your buddy that's manning the checkpoint with you is also an agent. And you're sort of besieged by these villagers coming down the road that want to get into the village, and you have to make sure they're all okay, and you have things like pregnant women, and you've got to be able to, examine them culturally correct, and you've got all kinds of altercations that happen, and invariably somebody, maybe it's the kid, sneaks past the checkpoint and runs into the village. At which point you have to go in and interrogate all the villagers to find out if anybody knows him, recognizes him, where he lives, if he's a good kid, or if it's something you need to be worried about. So this was kind of a fun little project that had a lot of agents doing things. But out of these connected, persistent virtual worlds, you can get much more intelligent characters. So this sort of state-of-the-art in virtual characters that have really smart AI programming. They can be very conversational, responsive, and they can actually perceive the human that's interacting with them, and they might even be able to tell what that human's feeling. I'll show you an example of that in a minute. But they're typically standalone. They come on when you turn them on. Except for this one. This one was one that was an AI agent called SimCoach. And SimCoach is a web-based virtual human. Again, you can type to him and he will answer you in a voice. He was designed for returning veterans who were reluctant to seek help or to even find out if they needed help. So with this, it's an anonymous web-based system, and you can type in questions like, I'm having trouble sleeping, or I just feel like going out and driving fast all the time, whatever it is. And the SimCoach is going to give you all kinds of resources in another column so that you might be able to look into more what your symptoms are and if you need help, and then if you do come to realize you need help, to give you ways to find that help, but all in an anonymous, kind of safe environment. Another project at ICT actually has the virtual human responding to the person sitting in front of the computer. So using this multi-sense system, which looks at all kinds of features from the face, the voice prosody, the body movement, the virtual human can take all that in and actually move appropriately to establish rapport with the person and give the kinds of answers that would be appropriate for what that person is feeling. So we're going to look at that. And this is a nice little video that they made that actually says what's going on as part of it. So that will be helpful.
Hi, I'm Ellie. Thanks for coming in today. I was created to talk to people in a safe and secure environment. I'm not a therapist, but I'm here to learn about people and would love to learn about you. I'll ask a few questions to get us started. And please feel free to tell me anything. Your answers are totally confidential. Are you okay with this?
Yes.
So, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well.
That's good. Where are you from originally?
I'm from Los Angeles.
Oh, I'm from LA myself. When was the last time you felt really happy?
When was the last time? I don't know. Yeah, I'm not someone who's really like, I don't have any real highs. I feel like I'm a level person. It's just happy. I guess to answer your question, probably a couple months ago.
I noticed you were hesitant on that one. Would you say you are generally a happy person?
I'm generally happy. It's just lately there are things just keeping me down.
Can you tell me more about that? When was the last time you felt really happy?
But I try to stay happy. I'd rather be happy.
going?
What advice would you have given yourself 10 or 20 years ago?
To not believe, to not be so gullible, not be so gullible. I've been told recently that I have a tendency to believe people too readily without them having to prove anything. And so as a result, recently I've gotten myself in a lot of trouble. And so I think that looking back, if I could have, I would tell myself to not believe, to not be so stupid, and to think, and just to not be so gullible.
Is it uncomfortable for you to talk about this?
Yeah, it is. I hadn't really thought about that.
So really almost creepy, I think, in some ways. But that person sitting in front of the computer has nothing on them, no trackers, no nothing. All of that is trackerless technology. But as sophisticated as these are, they don't learn about you. So it's a one-off every time. They're not really keeping any information about you. They can't say, well, you were really upset the last time we talked, so, what about now? Are you feeling better? They don't know any of that. They don't learn. So they're very intelligent, but they don't keep anything in their heads. So what I wanted to ask was, avatars don't know when I'm there. So they don't learn from me either. I really would like my avatar to learn while I'm using it. So if we go back to the broken mirror video, what happens when I log off? That avatar is not there. But if I had an avatar that did learn from me, perhaps it could still be active in the virtual world when I am not logged on. And it would behave like me, and it would respond like me, and it might remember and have experiences that it could share with me when I do log back onto it. Now, we really have to find a way to get virtual humans to learn, and to really learn. So there are people working on this. One of them is Paul Rosenblum over at ICT, and he has won the Kurzweil Award in 2011 and 2012 at the Artificial General Intelligence Conference, and he has started this project called Sigma, which is designing from the ground up a new form of cognitive architecture where the virtual humans will actually be able to learn. So he's been working on it for about a year, maybe a little more with the planning, and it'll take 5 years or more to actually get this really to be robust and to have these virtual humans learn. But he thinks he'll have something to show by the end of the year, and I keep urging him on because he knows I want avatars to learn from me. So why would we care if the avatar can still be active when we're not logged on? Well, I'm going to show you one possible practical application, and it's part of a project that we're working on for NASA, my new little company, called Ansible. And I'm going to just play this video. I might go through it a little fast, but Ansible is an acronym for something.
The Ansible project demonstrates a prototype virtual world that astronauts on long-duration spaceflight missions can use as a psychological home away from home. Ansible provides activities that serve as ways to escape the confines of the spacecraft, explore new forms of interaction, and stay in intimate contact with family and friends back on Earth. The communication delays native to long-duration space missions make traditional connections such as real-time video conferencing impossible. Email and other asynchronous communications remain available, but adding a rich three-dimensional environment gives astronauts the opportunity to spend some time in the same space as their loved ones while on their voyage, even if not at the same time. The keystone of the Ansible virtual world is called the FAMCOM, or Family Communication Center. At the center of the FAMCOM is a large hall showcasing the phases of the moon, with its current phase back on Earth indicated by a gentle glow. Above the moon is a model of the sun and terrestrial planets, showing the trajectory of the astronaut spacecraft on its way toward Mars. The red line indicates their progress along the journey. There are several activity rooms within the FAMCOM, all designed to reinforce a connection to home and Earth. The library is a space for relaxing, playing the virtual piano, or an ongoing game of chess with a family member. Or one can visit the art gallery, with its regularly changing exhibits of artwork. The club is where the astronauts can sit amongst other avatars. These are programmed AI agents that can engage in small talk and act as an interactive audience for stand-up comics or video shows. They can also fill the dance floor when the club turns into a disco. In the post office, astronauts can pick up a 3D file from home for printing on board, or they can play a specially created two-player game with a family member back on Earth, which has been designed to elicit positive shared memories. The Earthlinks room provides the latest in Earth-side weather, recent snapshots via Google Maps, a skylight linked to changing weather patterns, and a recent video of an Earth-based weather event. An astronaut doesn't have to stay in the FAMCOM. There are other interesting places within the expanse of the virtual world. For example, they can choose an interesting vacation from a range of virtual destinations in the vacation room, take part in a historical recreation, dive a coral reef, or enjoy a quiet evening in a small town on a front porch at sunset. All are possible. Through one door of the FAMCOM is the amphitheater, where presentations from Earth can be uploaded to the video screens and enjoyed on demand. Another door leads to nature walks, virtual campsites, and serene rocky shores. The last door leads to the meditation center, where classes in mindfulness can be accessed via recorded sessions. There is beautiful landscaping and a Zen garden for strolling. Also within the FAMCOM, astronauts are able to access private areas in the Ansible world designed for family interactions, which can be reached by clicking on one of the signs to teleport to a private region. Crew and family can design these areas to resemble their own homes, or one of imagination. This space is an example, with a living room, kitchen, dining, and family rooms, as well as a garden area. All of the items, as well as the rooms themselves, can be selected from one of the 3 available malls that are stocked with a variety of merchandise. Special events, such as a shared virtual Thanksgiving dinner, can be held in the private home spaces. While a real-time dinner is not actually possible, a metaphorical dinner can be held asynchronously, with each family member visiting the space and leaving a note about what they are thankful for that others can enjoy later. This type of activity can help reinforce the emotional ties between family members even while they are separated for many months. We have based the offerings within Ansible on scientific research that indicates the psychological value these forms of activities have for people. We believe they will also serve in a virtual form to enhance the astronauts' experience on long-duration space voyages, allowing them to remain better connected to their loved ones, expand their perceived space through the expanse of the virtual world, and provide them enjoyable activities for their discretionary time.
So I'm going to go to the next slide. You know, we had the club with a bunch of AI agents that you could talk to and stuff, and they could serve as like an embodied laugh track for some video. But this is designed for astronauts going to Mars, where it's a 3-year trip, and they're not going to see much outside the spaceship when they're on their way. So right now, if they go to the ISS, they can all go up in the cupola and take pictures of Earth, and it's endlessly fascinating for them, but they're just going to see black when they go. And there's going to be a communication lag, so it's up to 40 minutes round trip. So our idea was to have this virtual world. There'd be an onboard server, and there'd be a ground-based server, and we built all this in OpenSim so that we can totally control it. But this idea of going into a space that you've made to look like your home, it would be really great if we had these kinds of avatars that behaved like the family members, so that could learn how to behave, or at least be programmed how to behave like a family member, so that when an astronaut goes in there, they can see their daughter, you know, doing things, or playing the piano, or sitting on a couch, and they could actually have a conversation with them. So NASA's been very excited about this idea. We're not sure how we're going to get it done, but we've got 2 years to work on that and to test it in a ground-based analog. So in order for avatars to become true surrogates, there's a lot of work to be done. I mean, we're looking at very primitive looking avatars. It reminds me of when I first got into virtual reality and how nothing looked real. It was all very primitive. You had very low polygon counts. Avatars today are pretty primitive compared to what I think they will be with those trends that I mentioned before. So, for example, nonverbal communication is a really pathetic thing in the virtual world. If my avatar wants to say, I'm embarrassed, I have to go to my inventory, I have to find these things, I have to click on them and run them, and it makes everything I perform in the virtual world to be a rhetorical performance, because I've had to think about it and then go pick these things. But it's something that researchers are they're trying to address. So, I mean, you could do things where you have sensors on your face that tie into the sensor, to the structure of the avatar's face or body. Not everybody wants to move their body the way they want their avatar to move in the virtual world. It's really hard to fly and have your avatar fly, even with a Kinect. But people are starting to look at it, and this book just came out. It's got a great many articles by some very smart people about how to address the concept of nonverbal communications in virtual worlds. And the reason I put it up here is because you can download this entire book for free. You can get a PDF from the Carnegie Mellon ETC site, so press.etc.cmu.edu, and they have made the book available for anyone as a PDF, which I think was really brilliant of them. Lots of great stuff in there. But I've also been tossing around some ideas with some neuroscientist friends of mine, and one of them was one of the developers of this epidermal electronic system. His name is Todd Coleman. He was working with John Rogers. And this is a very small kind of tattoo with a lot of electronics in it. So it's got RFIDs, it can have skin conductance, it can have temperature, it can have EKGs, it can have EEGs. This can measure a lot of stuff, and it's very flexible, and then it can be taken off without too much trouble. So the question is, what if these unobtrusive sensors could actually read not only our bodies, but our minds? So Todd and I have been talking about this idea of looking at our neuro signals, and they're actively working on what kind of neuro signals can be gained from this epidermal electronic patch. They've been doing tests, and with the frontal lobe activity that they can measure here, and comparing it to 128 lead EEG, they're finding about a 90% correlation. So it's a lot easier to put that patch on than to put that 128 lead cap on. So, but you know, what do the neurosignals give us? Really what you want is to be able to tease out meaning from those signals. So I'm not talking about a brain controller interface where you think, I want to move, and your avatar moves. I'm thinking of things like our emotional state. So using some very sophisticated ICA or independent component analysis, you can actually identify Gestalt emotional states from one's brain patterns. And if you could do that, then as long as I have that patch on and I'm using my avatar, that avatar can realize when I'm happy and act happy. Facial expressions could match, or sad, or angry, or whatever. So it's kind of a more natural connectivity than just putting on a brain kind of sensor thing and saying, I want to move, I want to move, I want to move. So it's just a start where my avatar becomes connected to me, both my mind and my body, with these sensors, and it reflects what I'm thinking. But eventually, I really want it to learn for me while I am using it. And maybe even when I'm not using it, you know, avatars could maybe have their own life when I log off. But it remembers and embodies my behaviors and can interact with others as I would if I was there. And this is what I call the ultimate selfie. It becomes a very advanced record of who I am. So we've had paintings, we've had tintypes, we've had photographs, we've had film, we have video, we have all these recordings of us that we can leave behind. In this case, I could have many. I could have an avatar that reflects my scientist self, and one that reflects my artist self, and A military commander could be using one in those military training scenarios where the avatar actually embodies some of that tacit knowledge and becomes a mentor long after that person has passed on. So it's not the singularity, there's no consciousness being uploaded, but there is enough of us left behind so that others can still get to know us. Grandchildren can go, ask for advice from their grandmother. And we may look pretty primitive to these people in the future, but it could be very endearing. Right now we might know our great-grandparents by a diary they left behind. It'd be much more fun to be able to talk to somebody. So we're not looking at our capabilities with this in mind, and that's kind of what I would like to push as an agenda, that we start thinking about how to get these digital representations of ourselves that are becoming ever more sophisticated to learn. So in 1900s we had the Brownie camera, which changed the way ordinary people could record their loved ones. And maybe we have the personal avatar scanning system in the coming decades. And by creating these faithful representations of ourselves, we leave a meaningful part of us behind after we're gone. So there's sort of my whole talk in a little word thing. But what I've been thinking of since I started working on this concept a couple of years ago was, what's going on with this? People are going, well, Facebook bought Oculus Rift. Well, what are they thinking? What are they thinking? And I have one possible projection of what could happen with Facebook buying Oculus Rift and this resurgence of virtual reality. So in Facebook you have a timeline. There's my timeline. Now the timeline is an encapsulation of your history. And it doesn't start when you join Facebook. It goes back as far back as you're putting in dates. So I didn't put my birth date, so it just says born. But it has things like when I left this job or when I started at that job. So in many ways, it is a little record of me. So what if, projecting 30 years down the road, we're using a 3D form of Facebook where we're an avatar inhabiting that, and everything we do becomes a different kind of timeline. It becomes, in effect, the ultimate selfie. So I don't know if this is what they're thinking at all, but it's certainly what I'm thinking, and I just hope I live to see the beginnings of it. Thanks for your attention. If you have any questions, I'll entertain them now.
Alex?
Oh, Alex will have some.
I have so many questions and I'm stupefied.
You're wondering, where can you get to it now?
Well, it seems a little bit off in the near future, but I lived through a lot of this stuff. I was thinking about Jaron Lanier and our experiments, and I have to tell you that the helmet, well, you probably heard it from other people, is simply astonishing. It was very, very crude, and the colors were primal, and the resolution was poor, and I didn't want to come out of it. And at one point, I was above the room I was in. It was about 150 feet in the air. I saw a table, and I dove down on the table. This is just with hand gestures. And there was something on the table, and a glass, I think. I picked it up and it turned into a rose. And all these things seemed astonishing to me. And I eventually persuaded him to work with me on a system that Universal Pictures might want to use as a public version of this. And we worked very hard. We got a very good screenplay from a very good writer, and had very handsome illustrations, and it was 1990, and Universal was not ready to do that, because all of this was not
Yeah.
available to them.
And it's funny for me to see the Oculus helmet come out because it's still not consumer
Oh,
grade.
oh, no.
And
Oh, no.
but I just recently learned about some other very interesting technology that will probably put Oculus out of business. That's kind of cool. And
Yeah.
The race is on.
the race but
is on.
The fact that there is a race
Yeah,
is the exciting part.
Sure.
You know, we started using the Oculus in the advanced games class last year, 50% of the people who got into it got sick. And that's still true today,
Yeah.
because there's sort of like, to build a game inside of a game-on display, we just don't know, there's some movements you cannot do, can't do jumping, and backing up is a problem. And there's like this little guidebook that we don't have enough trained engineers and designers who know how to design for it. So there's a lot of work to be done, but the costs are going down.
Costs are down.
I just want to make one observation that is one of my great takeaways from this year or two that I was involved with this. And it is that the people on the other side of the desk are very much like you. Management wants to squeeze every dollar out. They want to capture whatever money they can from the work of creative people. The creative people are equally as amoral. And
More so than engineers, is
Yeah.
what I've experienced.
so that you have to be prepared to do a number of performances with your head just to negotiate. So, and those are human behaviors on top of these other things.
Well, there's the whole part that she doesn't mention here, which is what I work with a lot of my PhD students is how do you model, how do you merge emotional and cognitive modeling such that I can have AI characters that have emotions. And so it's just because until I can do that, I can't interact with them emotionally. And that modeling I think is within shouting distance of that.
Now, there must be a number of books being written, and I presume, and classes in the fact that we are in the middle of maybe the most astonishing changes in human interaction and in consciousness discovery pursuit that the species has ever had.
A big change.
And the change between young people around here and people in the 80s like me has never been greater. Except, of course, I've been living with this crap for my whole life.
Yeah, I mean,
So those books up there that were the books I grew up on. But not a lot of folks have that bridge, at least, so that you say, yeah, this is where we should be. This is where I want to be.
And you guys are just going to expect it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the thing, we've had to dream it and fight for it and make it happen, make it so, and you guys are going to continue that, but you're going to expect it to be this way.
I think there will also be opposition that may be very strong at a certain point. It's very frightening, and well, you can see grotesque examples of this around the world, in which this interaction is filled with fearful things. It's quite frightening to most people.
Any other questions? I'm sure you have projects you want to show.
exactly.
And I think I'm going off